But if we look at a section of patients who come for counseling for refractive surgery, the incidence of keratoconus suddenly jumps up to around 8%. Why so? It is probably because of cell selection and desperation. Now, these patients come to our clinics in various formats. They might come to us in severe ectatic states like this, post-arc ectasia. You might find post-LASIK ectasia like this. You might have subtle signs like Vogt stray, Fleischer's ring, Terrien's marginal degeneration. You might have peripheral thinning like this over here, both superiorly and inferiorly, pellucid marginal degeneration with inferior thinning. Or you might have these obvious signs like extreme ectasia and keratoglobus. Now let us look at this particular lady who had come for refractive surgery, 26-year-old lady. Clinically normal looking eye. If you do the Placido analysis, absolutely symmetric bow tie pattern. Manifest refraction is about 1.25 with 0.75 cylinder. Keratometry of 44.7 and 46 diopters. Corneal thickness at the apex is 500 and minimum corneal thickness is 494. Well, this case probably can be a juicy proposition for refractive surgery because the refractive error not being very high. But if we take this patient up on a Bellin-Ambrosio display of pentacam, you immediately see a normal anterior curvature with a significant posterior keratoconus. So it would have been a disaster if we had taken this patient up for corneal refractive surgery. Now, we have traditionally used the Placido device to analyze the corneal surface, which analyzes only the anterior corneal curvature. With the signs of keratoconus would be egging of the Myers. You might find localized increase in surface power with concentric areas of decreasing power. There would be definite inferior-superior dioptric asymmetry. And if you look at the quantitative criteria, you will find the central K more than 47.2, difference between right and left eye keratometry, central keratometry of more than 1, sim K on an average more than 45.7. And there's a SRX pattern which is more than 30-degree deviation from the prime meridian, which is pathognomonic of keratoconus. Now remember this case that we just discussed. Had we just relied on screening this patient on Placido alone, we would have ended up with post-LASIK ectasia. So what we need is something, we need to understand keratoconus first, the basic genesis of keratoconus, which is, it is a component involving both corneal thinning and ectasia. The ectasia can both be anterior and posterior, right? So what came first, the chicken or the egg? Did the posterior ectasia come first or did the anterior ectasia come first? Now let's look at a few day-to-day clinical examples. I would say look at a case of post-myopic LASIK, where we have flattened the anterior curvature, we have thinned out the cornea. So we have thinning, but we don't have ectasia. So this doesn't fall into the gambit of corneal ectasia. Let's look at a case of disciform keratitis, where we will have sudden bulging of the anterior surface. We have ectasia, yes, but we don't have thinning. So again, this doesn't fall into the gambit of ectasias. Let's look at a case of Booth-Thalmos. There will be stretching out of the cornea, where there will be ectasia of both the posterior and the anterior surface, but there is definitely no thinning. So we can't call this case ectasia. Now let's look at isolated condition where only the posterior surface is bulging forward with normal anterior curvature. Yes, we have a thinning and we have a ectasia. So this is called subclinical keratoconus. Now a case where both the anterior and the posterior surfaces move forward has to be discriminated from a condition like Booth-Thalmos, where also both the surfaces move forward. But the difference here is that the posterior surface moves forward more than the anterior surface, thereby causing not only the ectasia but bringing in the component of thinning. So yes, the keratoconus, established keratoconus will start with posterior ectasia, go on to have anterior ectasia, with the posterior ectasia always being more than the anterior ectasia. So essentially we always need to check the backside to have a good analysis of these patients before refractive surgery. The rotating Schlemm-Fluke camera, the Pentacam, and other devices that are available in the market do a fairly good job. It scans the cornea 360 degrees from limbus to limbus and gives us plenty of information. 6 minutes. Basically, it's a very simple device to understand. All you need to be is on the system. It is intuitive. All values are instantaneously available and they're color flagged just like a traffic signal. If red, it's abnormal. If it's yellow, it's borderline or something debatable. And if it's white, it's normal and nothing to worry about. So that's all, everything is color flagged. You see reds over here, you see yellows over here, and everything in white here would be normal. So you know what to look for. There's always an intuitiveness for you to see without actually going into detail of abnormal things in the map. You can have your K ray values over here, you have corneal thickness at the apex as well as the thinnest possible point, you have the anterior chamber depth, you have the sagittal map, corneal thickness map, back elevation maps, You have all the details available to you. One of the very big tools that the Pentacam offers is the BAD display, the Bellin-Ambrosio 2 display, which is very specific for keratoconus or corneal ectasias. You have on the left, you will have the analysis of the anterior surface. On the left, you will have the analysis of the posterior surface. This is based on the principle of best fit sphere and enhancing on that the enhanced best fit sphere. I don't think we'll have the time to discuss in detail, but you see red flagging over here, which is a difference of the top and the middle. The top is your regular best fit sphere, a regular map. This is the enhanced best fit sphere, and the bottom is the difference between A and B, the top and the middle one. So I might sound a little vague right now, but I really don't think we have the time to go into the details of these things. So you see the anterior ectasia over here as well as the posterior ectasia. The posterior you find more than the anterior, as I was talking to you about, and there are D values over here. You have these D values. DF, DB, DP, DT, DY. What they mean is DF is front. These are markers, the front marker, back marker, progression index marker, thinnest point marker, and displacement of the thinnest point marker. And there's a cumulative D value which also gives you an overall score for the patient. So anything in red is abnormal, yellow would be borderline, and white is normal. So it also gives us a very detailed pachymetry analysis of these patients, and there are now, this is a very interesting case I wanted to have a look, because you see this is a patient who hasn't got any surgery done till now. You see the pachymetry at the apex is 447 and the minimum corneal thickness is 446. Now anybody would say that this patient might have corneal ectasia, very high probability to have corneal ectasia. But as soon as you do a bad analysis, Bellin-Ambrosio analysis of these patients, you find that there's absolutely no anterior or posterior ectasia. In fact, the pachymetric progression maps are absolutely normal, except you find a red flagging at DT, which analyzes the corneal thickness. So the red flagging gives us that intuitiveness to look at that value. Why is it a thin cornea? That's the reason it's red flagging it. But apart from that, everything else is normal. So this patient might have a thin cornea, but does not have any element of ectasia. As I said, you don't need to learn anything if you're on the system. If you're on the system, these are various values that are available. By keeping your mouse cursor over these values, you can get the definitions, you can get the normatives, you can get the detailed analysis about each of these values, and they tell you about the corneal indices. Over here, you see the steep keratometry over here, and you can see an area of ectasia. What has been understood is that less than 0.5% of the patients have 3 standard deviations of variability from a normal. So any anterior elevation more than 8 microns above the normal, or any posterior elevation of more than 18 microns above normal, would be considered abnormal. You see here, this is a case of post-LASIK ectasia. What's more important here, when you analyze a case of post-LASIK ectasia, never look at the anterior surface, because that's already been altered. What you need to look at is the posterior surface, or you have to compare the posterior surface data from previous maps before the surgery. And the criteria still remains the same of more than 18 microns. If you look at a Bellin-Ambrosio display of a post-LASIK ectasia, please ignore the anterior surface maps, because they have been altered and they don't stand true. What you need to look at is only this central map column showing the posterior elevation maps, and you look at the D value of the posterior changes. What is new and coming up in Pentacam is the progression index, the normal values. Anything less than 1.2 would be normal, above 1.2 would be abnormal, and the Ambrosio relational thickness values, which less than 325 are diagnostic of keratoconus, and any normal patient having values less than 385 should not be considered for LASIK, and this is supposed to have a very high sensitivity and specificity. Apart from that, there are numerous other values we don't have the time to get into. I think I'll conclude here. Thank you.